to tell you about the history of me and Gary. I met him, my husband Gary, when studying statistics at Purdue University during the first year of class in September 1980. Only 2 weeks after I came to the United States. 2 weeks after meeting him, he started working for me. He starts waiting for me at my graduate school office and walking me to all our classes. We took the same class, but coincidentally, in the first semesters. We soon began dating after that and stayed together since then. We got married 8 months later, and we have been together for more than 41 years. I was always impressed by his sincerity, warmness, neatness, organization, deep commitment, and not to mention his good looks. He always helped me to understand new things and encouraged me to broaden my horizons. Gary's father passed away when he was only 11 years old due to heart attack. And unfortunately, he repeated it on Gary 52 years later. His mom was a loving and responsible mother who could barely speak English because her native language is French and did not even know how to drive then. Even though Gary is only 11 years old, he tried to help his mom as much as he could then. And he was telling his mom that time for his age 11, he told his mom not to worry, from now on, I will shovel all the snow for you. And he did. And he tried to help his mom as much as he could, and his mom was so proud of his son. And now his siblings stayed in school, admired him too. He was a hard worker and started working very young, first as a paper boy, and continued into grad school where he was teaching assistants. We got married at Purdue when both of us were relatively poor, but we were very happy together. We support each other through the tough times and build our family together. Gary was very competitive and passionate about everything he did. However, he was a very gentle and kind man. Gary always tried to live in the moment. In Chinese phrase is 活在当下, and do everything with extreme devotions. He looked forward so much to his retirement and wanted to travel the world and see as many places as he could. He loved Broadway shows, concerts, classic rock concerts. After he retired, then he was dragging me to the concerts where the bands and singers he grew up with were playing. Most of them were in their 70s already. He also quickly filled our calendar with international vacations to all the places he always wanted to go. All the things he was never able to do when he was younger. He joked with me that all I wanted to do was save money and die rich. And all he wanted to do was enjoy life when he could. Obviously, we didn't agree about everything. But I'm so glad now that I went along with him so that he had opportunities to enjoy his interest. And he had a lot of interest. What he could. Either was running, collecting wines, concerts, dining, hiking, or traveling. Sadly, the pandemic took away many of his opportunities in the final 2 years of his life. I only wish he could have more time to do all the things he wanted to do. Gary enjoyed playing with his grandchildren so much that he was basically my granddaughter Mary's, not only 6 years old, best friend. They had so many silly nicknames, games, they would only play with each other. My grandson Campbell, who is now almost 3 years old, loved to play with him the most because Gary was such a kind and patient man. He would do anything or play any game his grandkids ever asked him to do. I'm afraid that they won't remember much of him when they grow up, because they lost their grandpa at such a young age. There is a Chinese parrot called 人生无常, which means impermanence of life. Chinese people use this phrase very often when sad things happen to someone suddenly. However, I have never thought this will happen to my beloved husbands so quickly and suddenly. I did not even have the chance to say I love you or hold on to him, or to tell him that I'll be with him for the rest of my life. He was the center of my life, and we had so many happy memories. Hopefully these happy memories and our two beloved kids' family will help me get through this difficult time and move on with my future life when always have him with me in my heart. And thank you for coming.
Thank you all for traveling far and wide to be here to honor my loving father and husband, Gary. My dad was always a hard-working, loving, passionate individual that has always provided me with only the warmest, most caring memories. Some of my earliest memories of my dad were calling me his little girl, just like his mother and my grandmother did every time I saw her. Although my dad was not an outspoken man, I somehow always knew the amount of love he had for me and my family. He was always organizing our activities and vacations in meticulous order. He dreamed to show and provide us parts of the world he never got to see as a child, and I can tell you that these are some of the memories that will stick with us forever. Every year he'd pick a vacation destination filled with national parks, amusement parks, and other various sites of the world. My dad loved adventure and loved roller coasters. My brother, dad, and I would make sure we hit every roller coaster at least once during our amusement park adventures, while my mom watched us from a bench riddled with motion sickness. We also went on many hiking adventures with our childhood friends, the Bernickies. I remember winding through some of these adventures since at the time I felt that I had better things to do than hike 15 miles in a day. But man, do I wish I could go back and do one last hike with him. My dad was also quite the turkey connoisseur and prepared Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner every year with his mother and my grandmother until her passing. In true Gary fashion, he carried this tradition on through his very last Thanksgiving of 2021. Christmas was always a big deal in our house. Stockings were always overflowing with only the best goodies, and he'd stay up every Christmas Eve to set all the presents up in perfect order underneath the tree. My childhood was filled with memories such as these that I will hold on to for the rest of my life. I look back at these moments now and wish I had told him how much I truly appreciated them. His attention and care to making sure he provided our family with only the most memorable moments was intangible. My dad worked so hard his whole life and looked forward to retirement. He actually had a countdown calendar 2 years in advance that he would watch every day until it was finally time. My dad always wanted to travel the world and immerse himself in the history of new and different places. Although he deserved so much more of those memories, I'm thankful that he had almost 4 short years to follow his dreams and see the world with my mother and his wife, Chenton. He also became quite the wine enthusiast and would jump at the opportunity to tell you all about the latest bottle that he had opened to share. I know that one of the biggest lessons I learned from him was through the continued persistence in whatever he did, whether it was vacation planning, wine researching, or science exploring. His attention to detail and perfectionism was infectious. Now grown up, I look at my own family that I've built with my loving husband, John, and amazing daughter, Maddie, and I take all the lessons I have learned from my father in my 34 short years of life, and I know they will provide me with the wisdom I need to create my own path in the future. Although my dad not only loved my brother and I, as well as my mom, I think the most special piece of him that will always be with me is the true love he had for his grandchildren. My dad had such a special relationship with my daughter, Maddie, and my brother's son, Cam. He never got tired of hiding in closets, jumping off couches, playing mini golf in virtual reality, or doing any of the other crazy antics they were always suggesting. When Grandpa was around, there was always fun to be had. Dad, if you're listening, I want you to know how much I love you and what a wonderful father you were. I know you were looking down on us, wishing you could be here to give us all one last hug and kiss on the cheek. I wish that more than anything, too. You will always be with me, and even though you're not here on earth with me anymore, I know the lessons and love you provided me with will be with me forever. I love you, Dad, until we meet again.
Hi everyone. I'll say a few words about Gary. He's my uncle. This is my aunt. Uncle Gary, although not related by blood, I believe I'm closer to him than any of my other uncles. I've known Gary for over 35 years. I think the first time we met him was when we visited him when my dad was still in Minnesota. Getting his master's degree. So I came here when I was around 9, and we lived in Minnesota. And after he got his master's degree, my dad was deciding where he was gonna work. He had different job offers in different states. And he ultimately took a job in New York because Argentina and Uncle Gary was there. And we always thought it was good to be close to family. I remember moving to New York around 11, and I visited Argentina and Uncle Gary every Thanksgiving and Christmas. Uncle Gary was always very hospitable and an inviting host, a welcoming host. He always had tons of great food and drinks prepared whenever we visited. I also remember spending the Christmases at his house. He and Argentine were always very generous with their Christmas gifts to me, and I felt like I was part of their family.
Wow.
With that, they really taught me the meaning of Christmas and gift giving. And as a child, sometimes you take all those moments for granted, and you don't understand the importance of those memories until you're older. Now looking back, I will always cherish those moments we spent together as a family during the holidays. Like having Gary's home cooked turkey dinners and playing card games with him, his mom, and other family members. My impressions of Uncle Gary growing up has always been that he was a person who was dedicated to both his job and his family. He was always organized and neat. I remember always seeing him itemizing and keeping track of his expenses in a notebook. He kept tidy receipts of everything. I admired his attention to detail and all the things that he did. And since I wasn't born here, and adjusting to an American lifestyle and culture was definitely challenging at times, but as I spent time with Gary and his family, I saw what an American family life was like, and it definitely left a positive impression on me. I never said this to him or even my aunt, but I saw Gary as a role model. So someone who had everything you can hope for: successful career, happy family, and a great home. Thanks to his influence, this is something that I feel I am lucky to have as well. I do want to talk about a couple of Gary's passions. After his retirement, he was really focused and passionate about traveling and seeing the world. To that end, I always look forward to seeing his posts on Facebook of all the different places he visited. He was so happy and upbeat about all his trips, and he loved sharing the details with everyone. It actually made me look forward to someday retiring and traveling myself. I am just sad that he didn't get to complete his travels to all the places he wanted to visit while he was on Earth. But I do find some solace that he will be able to complete that goal in heaven instead. One other very important passion that Gary had was his love of the Mets. Win or lose, he would still watch all their games, a true fan. I remember when I first came to New York, he actually took us to a Mets game, where we tailgated near Shea Stadium, near an overpass at a parking lot outside of Shea. I believe we had hamburgers and hot dogs, and we cooked it on a portable hibachi. But that was the first time I ever done or experienced something like that, tailgating, an American tradition, right? American sports tradition. At the time, it was a very strange experience for me, but that first experience and memory has always stuck with me. During the past few years, due to the pandemic and my family moving away from New York, we have not had our usual holiday gathering at his house. Last Christmas, we were actually planning to come out last Christmas, but due to a surge in COVID in Europe, we decided to cancel, which is something I do regret now. I'm also regretful and sad that God has taken such a nice and kind person away from his family so soon. I regret that I will not get to spend more time talking to him, listening to his stories, and learning from his life experiences. So I think it's very important for all family and friends in general to put aside any differences and get together at least a few times a week, a few times a year, to share some priceless memories together. Because in the end, nothing else matters except those memories and your time with your family and friends. That said, I am consoled by the fact that many of his friends and family are here today to honor and celebrate his life. I think he is definitely smiling down on all of us from heaven. Thank you for being part of my life, and I will truly miss you. Gary.
I can't find my speech. And I was reading it on the way here in the car. It's just gone. I don't know, I can probably look at the seat, I don't know.
Sure. Actually, Howard and I are going to do a tag team. So Howard is going to go first and see Gary before I did.
Hi, I'm Howard Campbell. Gary and I worked together when we first moved to Nesson Valley in 1983. And I'll tell you up front what I think of Gary. I've lived all over the world, and all over the world. I lived in Jamaica, I lived in Canada, I lived here. And if I were to say of the 2 or 3 finest people I've ever met in my life, that includes my parents, Gary would be one of them. He was absolutely phenomenal. And in the world that we worked in, at times there was intense pressure, and Gary could always be calm. He would always see the light at the end of the tunnel. The previous speaker mentioned the Mets. Gary tried to convince me that I should be a Met fan. To the extent that one day he said, I'm going to take you to a Met game. So he got the tickets. I reluctantly got into his car. We drove all the way to New York City, and the game was rained out. But when I think of Gary, the most important things I think of is integrity, excellence, and innovative. There wasn't a person I've ever met in my life who has the type of integrity that Gary has. I used to call him perfect, and I was extremely serious. And you know, I can imagine what the loss is for you folks, because I feel it too, because he was absolutely a phenomenal person. Probably, I would say the best, the absolute best. And thank you.
I have water here in case my throat gets dry. So and I'm getting emotional, so that's why I thought I would actually write this out and tell you about Gary. Gary was my friend. I met Gary in 1994 when Bernie Clark recruited him to join a new group of 4 people to work on customer satisfaction and market intelligence. Now, what happened was, just previous year, IBM went through the large layoffs, and probably 50% of the people in the Mid-Hudson area, there were around 25,000, actually were laid off. So this was an opportunity for us to change careers. That's what we had to actually do. So I joined Bernie's group. He asked me, he was the lab director in IBM Research and Development. And Bernie asked, he said, I only have 2 people in the group, we need more people. Do you know of anybody that's really good? So I said, sure, I know Gary. Gary's a statistician. So at first he said, well, why do we need a statistician? But later on he realized that was the most important skill that was required for the job that we had to do. So from day one, Bernie assigned Gary to present to the IBM executive teams and to the general manager. He saw the talent in him right away. So I got to work with Gary every day, usually 10 hours a day, for the next 22 years. So I got to spend a lot of time with Gary, almost not as much time as his wife and his family, but many, many hours that we would commiserate. So over the years, I got to know Gary, and we became like brothers, really, because we worked every day. We went to meetings, we went to lunch together, and we had similar interests. Gary was always a gentleman, was polite, was generous, and I bet you didn't know that the G in Gary stands for always generous with his time and many talents. Gary was always assigned the hardest tasks because senior management, the VPs, the vice presidents, and general managers were confident in his ability, they trusted his judgment and his work ethic. Gary was always doing everything above expectations, with excellence. He was super organized in everything he did, and you've heard that from a number of the speakers earlier. Later as a manager, he was non-judgmental, he was very supportive, and he was a great people manager. I also learned, that's the work stuff, but I also learned that Gary loved his family. He was very proud of his son, Dan, and his daughter, Alexis, and he talked about them and their accomplishments. This goes way back, so some of it may be a little fuzzy, but I remember he said Dan, in his first year in college, majoring in electrical engineering, got a 4.0. So he was very proud. So we exchanged things about the accomplishments of the family. And then he said Alexis had an internship with a startup I think it was a biotech company.
Yeah.
So he was very proud of the accomplishments of his children. He was also very proud of his wife and said she was an accomplished statistician doing analytics on new chips being developed at IBM. And then when we went to lunch to have Chinese dinner, he would always comment that the food at home was authentic and it was much better. Outside of work, as you've heard, Gary loved the outdoors. On his days off from work, he would go hiking all over the Catskills and rock climbing. Wouldn't you know that his email was Gary Hike? And he used that in various passwords to various accounts that he had. He also loved the Mets baseball team. We would kid him when the Yankees beat the Mets, but he was very loyal to them no matter what. He was also very happy when his brother was coming to visit so they can go to the Mets games. Gary loved wines and became a connoisseur of red wines. We would talk about wines when we had lunch at work, but Gary studied them and procured the best wine collection of his friends in the investment club that he belonged to. But he also made sure that they were stored and served at the right temperature to the degree. He looked forward, he told us, to the day when his son would enjoy a glass of one of his finest wines with him rather than a beer. And I also contacted two of his former senior managers, Bernie Clark, who lives in Maryland, and also Julius. Julius conveyed his condolences, and he's going to send a note to his wife, to Cheng-Ting. But Bernie sent an email, and Bernie is very articulate. This is what Bernie said. Gary was always so young to me. Or am I just too old and have not appreciated how much time has passed since I enjoyed all the times we had together? And then he said, Gary was at once young at heart, but also so businesslike. He could be such a serious guy with a quick smile and an aw shucks sense of embarrassment about his abilities. Gary was so articulate and so composed in his work. He was the epitome of a great employee, a worker, and a friend. I often remember him as someone whom I never understand how accomplished he was or how much he had attained. And then he says, you can't say this often, but he was wonderful, wonderful, a wonderful man and fast friend. So I had to look up what fast friend meant. What it means is a good, loyal friend, and you instantly, I guess, get the chemistry and associate with. So I want to say farewell and goodbye to my dear friend, and may he be in peace.
Thank you. My brother Gary, what would we have done without him? When we lost a father as children, Gary became our guide through life. I truly believe he enjoyed the role, as he was a born leader. Even as adults, he was our rock and our go-to, as he was for many people. He was always willing to lend a helping hand, and he would shower us with his knowledge and wisdom, and sometimes even when we didn't want him to. As a child, Gary was very adventurous and mischievous. So of course, so was I. I followed my big brother a lot. One of Gary's favorite things to do in the winter was throwing snowballs at cars. And you know he had a system. We had a tree in the front of our yard with a perfect view of the road. So Gary would make a pulley with a bucket and fill the bucket with snowballs and pull them up to the top of the tree where he was. This way he could throw the snowballs without being seen or caught. A few times he went so far as to building snowmen in the middle of the road so the cars driving by would have to stop and get out of the cars and someone just kind of turn around and go the other way. But it was something to see, anything for a laugh. In the summertime, one of our favorite things to do was to explore the woods that were at the back of our house. Almost every day, our mom would pack us a lunch, and off we would go into the woods looking for a new adventure. We also enjoyed playing sports and board games. Whatever it was, Gary simply had to win. Even if it meant cheating. I think we're all familiar with Gary's competitive nature. As adults, we joke about it all the time. And of course, being the well-rounded individual that Gary was, even as a child, he showed his intellectual side. We actually played library. Whatever he chose to do, and he pushed himself to be the best that he could be. He was the most organized and steadfast person that I've ever known. He also gave everything and everyone his all, and his stamina was remarkable. These are just a few of many of the qualities that I admired about him, my brother. Gary was the true meaning of the phrase, a gentleman and a scholar. He was so loved, and he'll be so missed. Also, my cousin, our cousin Nicole, wants me to send all the condolences to the family and everything, and says her heart's here with him. Thanks.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to take a couple minutes to say something?
I'll be brief. I'm glad that George started with Gary was my friend. Same is true with me. I met Gary in 1982, and as is a theme here, Gary took a management position, and I started to say, well, I replaced him, but actually, as you know, you couldn't replace him. And quickly, I was like, holy, there's no way. He just did the job, but I did my best. But the blessing of it was, he trained me, so we spent a lot of time together, and we got to know each other. And it turned out, coincidentally, that we were sort of neighbors. We lived within a mile of each other. He started his family in a nice neighborhood, and me with my beater house around the corner. But the best thing is, we both were Mets fans. And yes, we went to many Mets fans. I went through somewhat of a dark time in the 80s, and I didn't even know he was helping me when he was helping me. And then, as you know, I eventually moved to Seattle, where I still live there today. We sort of kept in touch a little bit as the kids were growing up and that type of thing. And if you're familiar with sort of the Bible story of the prodigal son, you could think of me as maybe the prodigal friend, because I didn't do that great a job of keeping in touch for 20-something years. And whatever, in the last 5 years, somehow we reconnected, and you know, he could have just said, where the heck you been? But no, it was like, come on, with the Gary St. Onge, you know, top level, let's have at it. And you know, maybe in statistical terms, as a friend, he's past the 5 sigma limit, if any of you did get that. I know that Gary knows. So like I said, I'll be brief. I just really wanted to talk about Gary as a father, a grandfather, a brother, and a husband. As George was mentioning, just like everything else, as a friend, if I could be 1/10 the friend that he was to me. And you know, if you have friends, being friends is super important. I just want to say, you know, like all of you, I can't explain how much I'm going to miss them. It's just a huge blessing in my life to have known him. So thanks for giving me a chance.
I first met Gary in Boy Scouts. I was a scout leader in 233 Pleasant Valley, and my son, I think, was a year or two older than Daniel, so when Daniel came on, I had already been a leader there. And of course, Gary had to be, signed up as a leader as well. So he learned fairly quickly that I was the one that took the kids on the hikes, and I didn't have any other little leaders that, had the stamina to do hard hikes, so we kept it kind of easy. And then Gary came on, and we started doing 20-mile hikes with the boys. And he was great. So eventually that led to us getting together as families. And we would do hikes in the Catskills. Oh, and Gary, I had just finished my 3,500 club hikes, which is, there's 35 peaks in the Catskills that are over 3,500 feet. And Gary kind of latched onto that and said, he's a goal-driven individual. And he said, well, that's a goal. So I ended up doing it again with Gary. And then he said, okay, well, how do we step it up a little bit? Well, we can do them all in the winter. So we did them all in the winter. And so that led us to, our families kind of got together, and we actually went to Washington, New Hampshire, and did a nice, what was supposed to be a 3-day, 2-night trek through the presidential range. And so we made it through to the first hut, and the weather was fine, and that was no problem. The second day, going to the next hut, the weather kind of turned on us, and continued to get worse and worse. And so we were just getting close to Mount Washington with the shelter, and I remember T-Bone, and I'm not even sure what her real name is, but she was really slowing us down. So we said, okay, let's take stuff out of her backpack and help her out so she can go quicker. And we found out she was been collecting rocks all her life. So that was funny. So that was our demolitions. So as we got close as families, we were invited to their house often for like holidays and New Year's Eve especially. And again, one of his passions was wine, and he would always have 4 or 5 of his best wines laid out, breathing and at the right temperature, and there was a good group of people there, but it turns out it was just me and Gary drinking. And he would know everything about it, and because he's reading the Wine Spectator, and I would try to sound a little bit intelligent and say, oh, this one's a little fruity, or essence of oak in this one, he was in a whole different category. But he always wanted to know, what I think about the next one, what I think of the next one. So he kept me drinking all night long, and I'm not a drinker at best. So I always had a nice wine headache in the next morning to look forward to. But yeah, Gary is one of a kind, and Gentine said to me on the way in, you were Gary's best friend. I wear that as a badge of honor, and thank you for that. I think of him as my best friend too. So, but yeah, we were who each other would go to for an adventure, whether it be hiking or running, or I was glad I reached out to him in the fall to do Mount Whitney in California. Unfortunately, he had a trip planned that didn't get canceled to Greece and couldn't come, but that would have been nice. So sorry for your loss, and we're all going to miss him tremendously.
Anything else?
I feel like everyone else has done a really good job getting through their speeches without crying like a baby. I might be the exception to that rule. So my name's John Keller. I'm Gary's son-in-law, Lex's husband. One of my earliest memories of my father-in-law was right when Alexis and I first started dating. It's like one of the most feared moments of any guy's life is meeting the father of the girl they're dating. Maybe that's why it stuck with me, or maybe it's because I got all hyped up over nothing, because shortly after meeting him, I could easily tell that he was one of the kindest, most caring, and passionate individuals you could ever hope to meet. You heard everyone talk about the hobbies that he'd thrown himself into head first, but there's really only 4 things that I can think of that I believe he held above everything else in the world: family, running, science, and wine. With the exception of family, running, science, and wine can all be interchanged in priority depending on the day. For as far back as I can remember, he would always have the perfect wine selected for any gathering, whether he knew what we'd be cooking that day, or the type of restaurant that we'd be going to, down to the individual preferences of Alexis, Dan, Shannon, and myself based on feedback that we'd given to him over time. He would always come prepared with the perfect bottle. And boy, could he tell you about it, and exactly why he selected it, and why he thought you were going to like it. And he was usually right. He poured himself into everything that he did without hesitation, and he did this in such a way where I can only hope that I'm as passionate about one single thing as he was about so many. I couldn't tell you the last time I ran a 5K before meeting my father-in-law, but he had a way of being so excited about things, it was infectious. And so there I found myself, running down a rail trail in Poughkeepsie, chasing someone 28 years older than me, legitimately trying to even keep up. I didn't realize it until after he passed, and we found his workout log that he ran 3 times a week on average, and kept a meticulous record of the day, the time, the distance, the weather, you name it. I don't feel as bad about losing now. He made sure that he became his grandchildren's best friends. I don't mean that in a way like grandpa spoiled them, although there was plenty of that. I mean to say that he generated such deep and meaningful relationships with his grandchildren that they didn't just lose a grandfather, they lost a friend, a playmate, someone who would entertain every one of their crazy ideas and would even add fuel to them. I know that we're really gonna miss him. We all will. The world lost an amazing person, and I'm not sure why, and I can't pretend to understand, but I do have faith knowing that the love he showed everyone around him will be carried on in all of our hearts. Dad, you were one of the best, and we're really, really gonna miss you. After this at 11:30, there's a mass at St. Columbo down the road, if anyone's not familiar with it. It's right down the road, and it'll happen at 11:30.
No, we're gonna work together over there.
We're gonna walk down there.
Yeah, the famous one lead us to there. This is how the carcass over there.
So, I don't know if you had anything else planned, but I think people can take a look at the photo boards, the slideshows. Thanks, guys.
I want to say a couple words. I really appreciate it because the pandemic, so I'm inviting family and close friends. And I appreciate your coming, show respect to Gary. And I think he'll miss you all guys, and he'll be happy in heaven. And hopefully one day I will join with him. Okay? Thank you for coming. And the funeral staff, will bring us to the church afterwards.
Thank you, Jim. Yesterday morning in Costa Rica. Okay, nice to meet you. Kiara. Okay,
对生活充满着热情。晚点计划好，晚点计划 step by step， 完全计划。so warm。
Oh God.
越下要强，越下以后我们还要在家里窝着待着算了。我说我们都。
Yeah, I was gonna say something.
Natural, you know.
Okay, so I'm a kid, so
Oh my gosh. I've never played games.
How's a friend?
I talked to Gary basically on Facebook. That's huh? I don't even know. I don't know. I told him.
But as I said,
I don't know all the what's the banks actually. Cameron, okay.
A lot of people.
What time is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can change mine. They can't go.
Yeah, you were pregnant for Daniel.
Yeah, you're right. I was pregnant. You look the same as before.
I told her, I gave her the chance to just give me the time to sleep. I read the thing that says I'm family. And she goes, look at you. I'm like, oh, I didn't know.
So what do you think?
Yeah. He can tell me, he's, oh, he has but it's not all the time. It's not always the time how long. One is that it's always warm. So it's always warm. And I think or maybe she just cold water, but he can go on his feet. We never met her, which is cocaine. Yes. The moment he got home, he's telling me. So there's always me telling me. His chance. Oh, he's trying to picture I was talking about. His son is stuff. Everybody.
Relatives and friends, if I could have your attention. At this time, we're going to prepare to leave for St. Columba for the church at 11:30. We're going to leave a little early just so we have time to set up the picture boards and everything at the church. So at this time, we'd like to invite you all to come forward, pay your final respects, and then go right out to your cars. Please turn on your headlights as well as your flashers, and you're going to be following our hearse up to the church in procession, okay? Okay. Thank you.